It seems as though there's always a divided opinion when it comes to Battlefield games and what time period fans of the series want these games to be set. When Battlefield 5 launched, some fans loved the fact that it was going back to World War II because they always wanted an updated version of 1942, and others were a bit tired of the old World War settings after BF1 and they longed for a modern warfare game yet again. Well, regardless of what side of the fence that you sit on and whatever the next Battlefield game may turn out to be, we're sadly going to have to wait quite a long time to find out. Electronic Arts are a publicly traded company, and as such, they have public earnings calls every quarter for their shareholders. They had one of these calls recently, and in it, they stated that the next Battlefield game will not be released until fiscal year 2022. Now, just to clear this up, because I've seen some people confusing this, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will launch in the real year 2022, as fiscal years are different, and the fiscal year 2022 goes from April 2021 through to March 2022. Based on what we know about when Battlefield games have released in the past, usually around October, that means that we could guess with a good amount of certainty that the next game will be released in October 2021. And that's basically 2 years from now. It's a long time to wait. So this may be disappointing to some of the fans, but also I think there are some real positives in here that we can take from this too. First of all, we have to assume that the next Battlefield game is already in development. We've seen it in the past from DICE and various other AAA studios that development on the next game in the series, or whatever the studio is making next, typically begins even before their next game has shipped. So if we assume that DICE has been working on the next Battlefield game already for a year or so, again that's a big assumption, but based on previous knowledge it's not out of the question. That would mean at least 3 to 4 years of development on the next game, possibly even more before it comes out, and that has to be a good thing. How often over the past few years have the community said that DICE needed longer to make these games? Battlefield 3, well, that launched in October 2011. It had a few issues at the time of launch, but it was improved as time went on and it turned into a great game. And that was 5 years in the making apparently. Battlefield 4, well, that had a ton of launch issues, very well documented. And that game released in October 2013, only 2 years after BF3. And then Hardline, well, that split the next DICE titles, and so Battlefield 1 didn't release until 2016. But even then, a lot of features were held back and drip-fed into the game because there wasn't enough time to get them ready for release. BF5, well, that's nearly been out for a year now, and that's been very much the same. The game released, again not without its issues, but we are still waiting on custom private servers, which apparently is still coming. Vehicle customization, I know that's still listed as coming soon. And I'm sure there's plenty of other features that will make their way into the game. We also have to remember that co-op, Battle Royale and even Ties of War were not in the game on day one. The map count was also arguably quite low. I'm not saying that with a longer development time that every single one of these features could be in a new game at launch, but I assume that there would be a much better chance, for sure. I look at the recent release of Call of Duty, and you can load into a private match or custom match on day one, load up any match with or without bots with custom settings, and I just think to myself, why does the latest Battlefield game still not have this? It's a massive shame, and I know that it's a bit more of a tricky one, but Battle Recorder, I'm saying it again, so many AAA games now have a system like this. Fortnite, PUBG, Black Ops all had really well done game recorders. We have to be honest though, the Battlefield series is a big game. It can't be an easy task to not only produce new content at a high level of quality, but also bug fix it, QA test it. Right now we still have issues with game performance and stuttering, invisible soldiers and plenty of other bugs that have just crept into the game over time. And DICE have been working to try and fix the game's performance so they can focus their time on other parts of the game and new content. But there's only so much time in the day. I feel like with the next game, again, assuming it releases in October 2021, with it having a longer development time, maybe on day one it will release with all of these features. What if we had private servers from the get-go? A co-op, if that's what players still want. Full customization across the board with no coming soon elements. A Tides of War service already in place that work straight away. More features on launch too, maybe soldier dragging, 12 maps, 60 odd guns and everything in between. But most of all, most importantly, it just worked. And at the same time, it still delivered that classic Battlefield sandbox. I think if you offered that up to most players, they'd be willing to wait an extra year for it. Also, you've got to think about the human cost of this too. If the developers have more time, they won't be as stressed, they won't be as pressured, and arguably their work on the game will be better as a result. Maybe with more time they can be more creative, less stressed out. That kind of stuff is really important too. The biggest issue with this massive gap between new titles is, what are the players, the fans of Battlefield, going to play in the meantime? Battlefield 5 has not scratched everyone's itch, and while I have no doubt that the Pacific content is a huge step forward for the game, it's going to be no easy task to keep people engaged and coming back for another 2 years. Players are going to want to know what content is coming, and that they're going to engage with, but more than anything, the core issues with the game needs to be resolved. And yeah, of course, you can still jump onto Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 because despite rocky starts, those games turned out to be extremely fun. BF4 in particular is still hugely popular. DICE now need to do that with BF5. So what guns and content come now is going to really define how much of the player base sticks around, but also how frequently that content arrives is important. I think that's been one of the issues so far with maps, modes and weapons, is that maybe they've been too far apart. Hopefully now that will change. There are a few other things that we can take from this announcement too. First of all, there were suggestions, more rumours really, that Bad Company 3 could be a launch title for the next generation of consoles. Well, that's now not possible. Remember, this is an EA earnings call, not a DICE one. So as far as EA are informing their shareholders, they don't plan on releasing any Battlefield game until at least 2021. What it does mean though is that when the game does release, the next generation of consoles will be out and in full swing. The PlayStation 5 and the Xbox 2 are due to release in the holiday of 2020. As to what the next Battlefield game will be, well, that remains completely unknown. I think, and this is just my opinion, that it will be set in modern day or near future. Will it be Bad Company 3? It could be, it's been rumoured for a while, but at this point it could be anything. I personally don't think DICE will go back to the Bad Company series, and they'll want to hit a home run with the next Battlefield game. It's so important for the franchise. They need the next game to be a massive hit and to redefine what Battlefield is. The thing is, the games industry is changing so much, and in 2 years' time it might look completely different to what it looks like today. So the next Battlefield game could be a radically different experience. Going full circle to what I said earlier though, I feel as though every time a new game is released, BF4 and BF5 especially, we've collectively said that it felt the game needed more time to be developed. In the case of BF5, DICE went ahead and delayed the game by a month. And I think that's the first time they've done that. And while it was disappointing, it was great to see that happen and take more time to work on the game. It may only have been a month, but they took it. What we will never know though is that was there a game planned to be released sooner, but because of the extra effort and time they're putting into BF5 now, has that been pushed back? Had they taken developers off that project to work on BF5 live service? Or was this the plan all along? We will never really know, and in the end it probably doesn't matter. For us, it's hard to say exactly what this means for the Battlefield franchise over the next 2 years. It very much depends on what DICE wants to offer up in terms of content. What could they do to keep players happy? Well, right now I think the Pacific has brought a ton of people back to the game. You can just look at the server list and see that for yourself. There's a lot of buzz and positivity around the game right now. Wake Island, of course, that's coming out in December, and we've got all of next year and maybe the year after for additional content. So what's coming then? Well, I imagine that with the Pacific and with the response that DICE have seen, we will be getting those iconic moments in BF5. Stuff like Stalingrad, Omaha, Berlin, Battle of the Bulge, Market Garden, the US Army in France, Carentan, all that stuff. And DICE can craft experiences based on those things. In terms of weapons, well, DICE are going to really have to dig deep into the archives of World War II to keep people happy for the next 2 years. There are so many weapons in the game already, but a lot of them are remarkably similar. I think they're going to have to really think outside the box with maybe some prototypes and less used guns to keep the excitement and entertainment factor high. Possibly 2 years or more from now without a new Battlefield game, it's a hard pill to swallow. But honestly, when you think about it, we have to accept this as a good thing. And this means that hopefully the next game, whatever that may be, will be the best Battlefield in recent times. A true next-gen offering that brings new stuff to the table but retains that epic Battlefield sandbox. And with the longer development time, maybe that's what we'll get. I really hope so. With that said, I am going to leave it there for today, guys. How do you feel about this announcement from EA? What would keep you playing BF5, and what do you think the next Battlefield game will be? What setting do you want it to be? If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you didn't, a dislike, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.